I was contacted with information about the possibility of designing a tapestry, or I thought it was a tapestry at that time, but it turned out that it's an embroidery.
The Christchurch City Council has commissioned a wall hanging to be made for the city to commemorate 100 years of women having the vote in New Zealand. At their first meeting in March 1992, it was resolved on the motion of Councillors Constable and Evans that a major commemorative work be funded by the City Council.
Towards the end of last year, I think it was about September, I was contacted, as also were several other artists throughout New Zealand. We were asked to submit proposals.
The City Council approached the Guild and asked them if they would be prepared to do a project for Women's Suffrage here. And the Guild approached me and asked me if I would be the coordinator for the project.
The theme should most appropriately relate to the multicultural theme of women's lives. That was the brief. And the artist-designer should feel free to openly interpret that theme.
It's a continuation of what I have been working on for some time. The work that I'm involved in tends to deal with gender issues and also the environment. At that time, I was very interested in the wilderness, the forest being symbolic of the female. It seems to be a universal symbol from what I understand, that the forest, the wilderness symbolises the female. Then we have order placed over that in the form of architecture. One can look at how the wilderness has been handled since the days of the Reformation in our culture.
Initially we had to transfer the pattern onto the linen, and that was done with the use of a light table, which was 2 metres long by 1 metre wide, and from that we rolled the cartoon slowly over and adjusted it onto the backing fabric, and it was marked on with marking pens. And from that the panel was set up into the frame, and the fabrics, the threads were chosen to use on it. And with that I then pinned a label onto each different area which showed the different threads to be used and what type of stitch to be used, so that anybody could then come in at any stage and see immediately what was to be done.
We have been working on it since February, once a week. We have had a team come in every week. We have been on Thursday mornings, and there have been 4 people coming every Thursday morning for 3 hours, plus myself as a supervisor, through the whole of that time. Also, during that time, there have been teams working for 2 to 3 3-hour shifts.
When we first got the cartoon, we had a group meeting with all the supervisors to discuss which ways we thought would be the easiest way of stitching the various parts of it. And we decided that some of the big areas, which were quite blank in colour, would be best dyed and applied material. It was the easiest way, and with the figures, which are the central part of the whole artwork, it was easier to do those in fabric to get the curves. To do them in stitching, as we stitched the others, would have given us very rigid lines. The fabric which has been used on the background has all been dyed by Pippa Davies, who's had a lot of experience in fabric dyeing, but it did present another challenge to actually get gradation of colour.
The actual dyeing process takes quite a long time. The dye powder needs to be accurately weighed. It needs to be mixed with accurate amounts of fluids. The piece of fabric has to be measured so that you've got, you know exactly how much fabric you are dyeing. Then the dye solutions need to be measured in proportion to the fabric, so that you have a lot of mathematics involved. I needed to get a colour fade for the sky over the seascape. I dyed a piece of fabric to the lightest colour that I required, and then to achieve the darker tones, I used the airbrush with a very concentrated solution of dye and mordants to paint the dye onto the fabric. We have eventually come up with a range of coloured fabrics that we need for the panel itself. 2 ranges of browns, various soft pastel colours for backgrounds, and there's some sky.
My approach to working with women has been that of collaboration. They're giving me options. Which sort of technique do I like? It's this interaction that's going on, this liaising and this interaction that's been very much part of the making of it.
A freestyle machine embroidery technique by which I use a number of colours to blend together, and it's done on this machine so you get the feeling of movement in the water, or you try to get that feeling of movement in the water.
Embroiderers Guild rooms. The other fragments, individual fragments, are being done by people away from the guild rooms. So the Chinese silk, the Polynesian storehouse, the colonial cottage, the Maori cloak and the banner have all been worked outside the guild rooms.
Up here I had the Oriental tapestry. It's very much in Southeast Asia. Here there is the Pacific Food House, and that's very much a Pacific food house, not specifically any one area of the Pacific. Of course, there are the European elements, the architectural bits. There's the Tanako weaving here, and the pioneering cottage here. It's a very plain pioneering cottage, not a folksy, attractive one. It's quite stark. And of course, the woman here is holding the Suffrage banner.
Said, oh, I'll make the cloak for you if you like. I've got time to do it. I'm going to be working with a group at Te Kaha, and while they're making whāriki, I could sit and make your little cloak for you. And I said, oh yes, please. And so Emily Schuster, who's from Rotorua and had been the head of the Māori, the women's part of the Māori Arts and Crafts Institute at Whakarewarewa, said she'd make the cloak. And I thought it was fairly apt to use modern materials because it's about the suffrage. If this was to do a suffrage year, about the time that the suffrage movement took place, the change would have gone from natural materials to using candlewick cotton and wool and silk and things like that. This is the weft thread, we call it the aho, that goes across, and we put the whenus or warp thread across it, and we have to anchor that by plying and changing the direction of those double threads. And I just simply keep on adding threads. And it becomes very regular, and in fact lots of Māori garments, people can't believe that this is a hand-plied thing, that it's not done with a machine.
So I try to get a global awareness coming through. And that was conveyed by the use of embroideries or tapestries, which I think is a common thing to women throughout the world. They do different forms of weaving and embroidery and sewing. And it's very apt because the women who are making this are doing an awful lot of stitching. And I know that the women in the guild have put countless hours into the stitching. And it is very much a tradition that it's volunteer work.
It is recognition because there's been so much work done by women. There still is so much work done by women in the country, the whole throughout New Zealand, that no recognition's been given to them. The fact that names have gone on, I'm really quite thrilled. Really am, because I tell my family my name's going to be there, and you can have a look, you can see it. But when it first came up, I said, well, that's women's suffrage, Kate Shepherd. Yes, my mother spoke well of Kate Shepherd. I'm going to do something for that. Even if I just make the tea, I said, I don't mind, as long as they come in and have some input into the whole thing. But as it's turned out, I have done some stitching.
The idea being, with their signatures, that their identities are made. The people who stitched will stitch their identities onto the work. I felt this was a very important gesture, and I was very pleased that they were happy to do that.
The way we've worked the panel, the whole hanging, is that we've got 7 panels. Then as each one was finished and taken out of the frame, then had top stitching applied to it and some just highlight threads. And after the highlight threads were added, the panels have then been joined on the machine in a long seam and folded back and stitched through both those layers to cement that hold so that you can't tell where they've been joined.
It's also symbolic of the ocean too, that circular, that curved shape, which relates to the watery images under the bridge of the ocean and that mirrored effect. The shape is also suggestive of the eye and universal links between women and, well, the eye for seeing and the lens and its womb light. And it's also like the ocean, and it would have a mirrored effect. The female here is actually confronting herself and what has gone before. So there is that dealing with the present and the future and the past.
One of the aims of the City Council and the Women's Suffrage Working Party was to have a project that would involve as many women as possible working together, and in this aspect it's been a resounding success. There are 101 women who've signed their names at the bottom, but there have been lots of other people who've been involved with it along the way. The support of the family and friends of these women, enabling them to achieve this task in 8 months, which was a major undertaking, must be mentioned, because at times it became all-consuming to those concerned, and the background encouragement for these people was paramount during the working of it. Also, the members of the City Council and the Art Gallery who visited the work in progress, would like to thank them, because all the enthusiasm that they gave us at the time was wonderful, and we became so engrossed in the project that and on the particular piece that we were working at the time, that we often lost the whole perspective. So for us to have the enthusiasm and feel the enthusiasm and the awe that those visitors gave us was wonderful and kept us going through the whole thing. When I first heard of the project, the excitement and the challenge was in the opportunity that we as a group of women had been given to project ourselves in a public way, and the recognition the City Council had given us, the opportunity to display what is often dismissed as a domestic craft in a very professional manner. So the raising of the status of embroidery was one of my aims throughout the project. We've got the heart and soul of the people who've worked on it, have been endowed into it, and we can all be proud that we've left a legacy for our grandchildren for the next 100 years. It is a living work of art.